Last week we began this series, God's at War. And, hey Matt, can I get a little more on the pulpit mic, please? And in doing that, I asked you to started off that series with asking you to use your imagination. And well, I have to do it again. So just for a moment, give me your attention and let's take you to the imaginary world. And some of this is going to be more difficult for you than others because I need you to imagine you're a parent. You have children. And some of you, I know that sends shivers up your spine. But you can imagine good kids, not the kind that you have to change their diapers and not the time to give you. You can imagine good kids. That's fine. But I need you just for a moment to imagine that you have children. And you were whopping through Walmart one day, and as you were looking there, you just happened to be strolling through the electronics department, and there on the shelf was the Game Buster 5000 game system, the thing that every kid in the neighborhood wants. It wasn't their birthday. It wasn't Christmas. It wasn't Valentine's Day or Easter. You had no logical reason whatsoever to buy them a present, except for the fact that you love your child. So you bought your child this present. And as a bonus, inside the Game Buster 5000 box was the game that every child is playing these days. You bring your gift home and you bring your child to the living room and you unveil what you have bought for them. And man, you are the best parent in the universe. Man, they are giving, thank you, I love you so much. And they grab their little box and they skip off happily to the other room because they know everything about electronics and they're going to set it up themselves. And they do so. And in a matter of minutes, there they are sitting in front of the television playing this gift that you've given them. And man, your heart feels so good, doesn't it? So it's dinner time. And you call them to dinner, and they don't want to get off the game system. They don't want to cut the game off because they're so enthralled in what they're doing. But you throw it off to the fact that, you know what, it's new. Okay, that's cool. So you give a little bit and you leave them, let them have a little latitude. But this goes on for a few days, maybe even a week. They come into the house and they run to where this game system is set up and they park themselves in front of it and they're playing the game. And when you do manage to get them off of it, they are talking about the game. And it even seems maybe they're even dreaming about the game. And the game just becomes part of their life. Well, not a part of their life. It begins to become their life. And in the back of your mind, as a parent, you become sorry that you ever bought the dumb game system. Part of you wants to take the wire snips from the toolbox and go upstairs and just cut the cord and make them go cold turkey. And it's because something has become more important. They become more interested in the gift than the person that gave it. See, we're going to continue our quest on the gods at war. Remember, last week we talked the idea, I introduced you to the concept that everybody worships something. Everybody has something in their life they are worshiping. Now for the next 5 weeks, in case you thought your struggles were over, we're going to spend the next 5 weeks talking about those things that we worship. We're going to identify our idols. And we're going to start with the one that consumes 68% of America's net take-home pay. Ponder that for a second. 68% of what we take home is spent on the gods of pleasure. It includes food. It includes entertainment. It includes sex. Yeah, we're allowed to say that word in church. Really, we are. It includes relaxation. And I just want to make sure you understand something because I don't want anybody to think that we're supposed to live this little island on this little thing where we're going to sit up in a commune and we're going to be monks and sit on the hill. In and of themselves, these things are not sinful. As a matter of fact, not only are they not sinful, they are gifts from God. You think about it. I enjoy food, and it's not because I enjoy food because I'm hungry. You know what I like about food? It tastes good. And you know who designed my body and put all those little taste buds on my tongue? God. You know who designed all these wonderful herbs and spices and different fruits and vegetables and even different animals? You know who designed all that? God. And you know who said it's okay for me to eat all that stuff? God. It works the same way in entertainment. There's nothing wrong with entertainment. I want you to think about it. Who designs your body so it can laugh? God. Who gave us the talents such as music and drama and comedy and even the ability to play sports? Who gave those abilities? God. Is it okay that we use those abilities so that we can provide a moment of happiness? No, there's nothing sinful about that. And there's nothing wrong with sitting down and watching a television show or going to a concert. There's nothing wrong with sitting at a football game or going out on the boat fishing. There's nothing wrong with any of that stuff. There's nothing wrong with sex. I told you we could say that word church. But you understand, this was God's design. It was God that said it's not good for man to be alone. It was God that decided this is how children are going to come into the world. It was God that says, be fruitful and multiply. It was God that inspired Solomon to write the book of the Song of Solomon. If you've ever read that, you understand. This is a gift. Until it becomes what we begin to worship. The same concept for relaxation. 10 commandments. We want to focus on don't have any idols, but you understand there's also this commandment. Remember the Sabbath and keep it holy. Why did God put that in there? Because He knows we're a bunch of workaholics. He knows that we would spend 7 days a week, 24 hours a day if we possibly could figure out how to make our bodies do it. And we would work, and we would always find something to do. And God said, no. You have to take a moment. You have to at least have a day to turn it off and go and relax. Shut it down. Don't do any work that day. Take a break. Take it easy. Sit back. Prop up your feet for a second. Contemplate who God is. All of these things are wonderful gifts from God. They are not sinful. That is until we find we are living for the gods of pleasure. Living for the gods of pleasure? What do you mean? Well, when I say we are living for the gods of pleasure, we understand it's what motivates us. It's what drives me to get out of bed in the morning. It's the fact that I can't wait for my television show that's coming on tonight. It's the fact that I can't wait because the day is the day of the big game and I have practiced all this time and that's what's motivating my life. It's driving me because, you know what, I can't wait until dinner time or I can't wait for a breakfast time. It's because I am motivated by these things that please me. It's the thing that we're really having one of those moments. Here we go. It is what our relationships center around. Now I want you to contemplate this. We've probably all dated at some point in our life. And I want you to think about your dating relationships. What do they usually center around? Well, going out to eat, pleasure, going to movies, which I always found was interesting because the idea of dating is to get to know somebody. And so why you take somebody to a movie to get to know somebody, but you're going to sit next to each other for 2 hours and not say a word to each other, doesn't really make sense to me. But it is what we do. Our relationships center around this idea of going to and be entertained. Let's not make any mistake. Sexuality becomes very big in our relationships, and we want to focus on getting to know. You can't get to know anybody better than that. That's the ultimate way. And so we center our relationships around these gods of pleasure because I'm feeding me. It begins to consume our time. How many times have you looked at something on a calendar and you're like, I can't do that because there's a ball game, or because there's a this, because there's a that. And we begin to take the things that cause me pleasure and we begin to cancel the things that are God because, well, there's just not enough time in my calendar. Come on, God, you created football, so I should be home, able to stay home and watch all of it, right? Gift and the giver, folks. Our budgets begin to resolve around it. Why don't you think about the idea, if you sat down and totaled up all of your receipts for a month that you spent on what it takes to entertain you or to provide food for you or provide all the other things for you, and you compare that to your tithe, how do you think it would work? We might shudder. Because my budget, let's be honest about it, and I'm now in my territory, my God, my idol. My budget sometimes can revolve around what pleases Barry. I am worshiping the gifts instead of the giver of the gift. And that's a sobering thought, isn't it? This idea that God created so many wonderful things for me, and I've just become so consumed with them that I am now worshiping the things that He's given me versus the giver that gave them to me. Suddenly I'm feeling like a 10-year-old little boy sitting in front of a television playing a video game that I just don't want to put down the controller because I'm so enamored with the gift. And I've forgotten all about the love of the person that's given it to me. So this morning, my goal is to remind you who the giver is so that you can maybe take your focus off of the gifts that you've been given. And we purchased this series, Gods at War, and I have to be honest with you, when I first saw this passage of Scripture coupled with this particular idea, I was like, okay, I need to go find another passage of Scripture because I don't get it. But then I began to read it, and I'm like, okay, I'm beginning to understand it. So if you have your copy of God's Word, let me ask you to make your way to 1 Kings chapter 18. This is not an unfamiliar story, and I will join you there in a few minutes because I want to give you a little background. 1 Kings chapter 16, verse 29 starts out this way. Ahab, son of Omri, became king of Israel, and he reigned in Samaria over Israel for 22 years. Ahab, son of Omri, did more evil in the sights of the Lord than all of those before him. So here we have in Israel, God's country, we have a king that is ungodly. And this ungodly king, he married a woman named Jezebel. And well, Jezebel was the princess of the Sidonians. And since she had other gods that were in her life, she decided, hey, you know what you should do? Ahab, you should help me and honor your wife, and you should help me set up little idol stations for all of my gods. And so they went around and they began to set up idols and altars to all the other little gods. And then because she really wanted to make sure nobody else was worshiping anybody else, then she decided to start killing off the prophets of the one true God. And God got angry. Because God is a jealous God, and not only now is He having to share His nation, Israel, with all of these little foreign gods, God now sees that His people are suffering because of it, because His messengers are being put to death. And so God raises up a man that we have looked at plenty of times, Elijah. Verse 17:1. As the Lord God, the God of Israel lives, whom I serve, there will be neither dew nor rain for the next few years, except for by my word. Elijah told of a drought that was coming. So here is God. Now you think, what does that have to do with entertainment? Hold tight. We're going to get there. Why this is about pleasure. Because here comes Elijah, and well, he comes in and he says, you know what? Because of what you're doing, because of what's happening in Israel, we're going to shut off the rain. Now, you have to realize Israel is an agricultural country. They are driven by agriculture. And so you shut off rain, I don't care how good of a farmer you are. No rain, no crops. That's just the way it works. So I'm going to take all of that away. And the thing that you need to realize out of this is don't expect God to bless His competition. Huh? What do you mean? Well, you need to realize that you pursue pleasure in one area and it ends up being your greatest frustration in another place. You see, because Baal, the god of Jezebel, he was primarily the god of the weather. That's how he started out. So you see what God is doing here. I mean, what He's doing is He's saying, fine, you want to worship the god of rain? I'll take away the rain. Does it sound familiar? Does it sound familiar that thing that you seem to pursue, that thing that you seem to want, always seems to be you're reaching out for it and it's always not there? You think, this time it's going to satisfy me. This time it's going to please me. This time the God of pleasure is going to do everything for me. I am reminded of another little 10-year-old boy that loves a game system. It's not a Game Buster 5000. It's called a Wii. I don't know why they call it a Wii, because it has nothing to do with we. It has to do with he. Okay? So we should have named it something differently. But my son Benjamin loves Mario. And you know what? He loves this game, and if you let him sit down next to it, I'm not kidding you, I could give him the controller at about 8 o'clock in the morning, and as long as I ran up there every now and then and set a little cup of water there for him to drink and maybe a little bowl of goldfish, I'd never see him again for the rest of the day. But I'd hear him. I'd hear him because as our day goes on and the game begins to beat him, and it does, he becomes frustrated at the game and he begins to yell at the television. And begins to fuss at the television, and it's not fair, and this is not going right, and you're not supposed to make it this way. You weren't supposed to do that. And I'm like, oh my gosh. I'm almost sure that Adam and Eve felt this. I mean, here was this serpent saying, you know what? If you eat this apple, you'll have knowledge just like God. Yeah, buddy, you got knowledge just like God. And the first thing you realize is you didn't have no clothes on. You see, that thing that we think we want, that thing that we think is going to finally satisfy me, we finally realize it will not, because God will not bless His competition. He's just not going to do it. You pursue a God of pleasure, and you will be frustrated. And you understand it's a worship issue. Again, let's walk through this process. Israel, worshiping the God of rain. So what does God do? He sends a drought. And I think this applies to us greatly because many of us are worshiping these things that are pleasure to us. And again, there's nothing wrong with it. I want to make sure I say that. There is nothing wrong with the gift, because if there was something sinful about the gift, I don't think God would have given it to us. But the problem is I have become so focused on the gift that, well, it's become a direct competition for God. And God's not blessing. As a matter of fact, not only is God not blessing, since I'm running after this God of pleasure and God is trying to get to be the sole person of my heart, what we end up with is a showdown. And now if you're in 1 Kings, see, I gave you plenty of time to get there this morning. If you're in 1 Kings chapter 18, verses 19 through 21, I want to show you the showdown. Here's how it works. This is what Elijah tells him to do. Now summon the people from all over Israel to meet me on Mount Carmel and bring 450 prophets. Man, that's good odds, isn't it? And 450 prophets of Baal and the 400 prophets of Asherah who eat at Jezebel's table. So Ahab sent the word throughout all of Israel and assembled the prophets on the Mount Carmel. Elijah went before the people and said, how long will you waver between two opinions? If the Lord is God, follow Him. But if Baal is God, follow him. But the people said nothing. So you get the wonderful picture, right? Man, this is going to be worthy of WWE SmackDown, folks. We're going to have 850 prophets on one side, and we're going to have the reigning champion Elijah on the other side. And at stake is the altar. The throne of who Israel is going to follow. God. 850 to 1. And Elijah makes this declaration. He says, now, Israel, before any of the festivities start, before we do anything, choose. Who are you going to worship? Are you going to worship Baal to do that? If you're going to worship the Lord, do that. But the people didn't say a word. Why do you think they said nothing? I mean, I've been to pep rallies before. I really have. And when you call out, you want your team to win, you go, yeah! You yell the team's name and you go, whoever they are. And then you cheer for that team. Elijah calls for a rah-rah cheer and he hears crickets chirping. They don't want to pick a side. And you know why they don't want to pick a side? Because they want both. Elijah would have had no problem saying, do you want Baal and God? They would have said, yeah, let's do that. Everybody will be happy. We can all sing Kumbaya around the fireplace. We can be one big happy family. It's all good. But that's not what Elijah does. He said, you know what? You got to choose. And they don't want to. None of us want it. They don't want to be forced to choose. So, instead, they don't. And instead of having the throne on our hearts where God reigns, often we have a love seat. Imagine that picture. Not a throne, a love seat. Now you realize a love seat is one of them, their couches is kind of shrunk and it's built for two. And God is asked to share the space with something or someone else. And oftentimes, it's a God of pleasure that we ask Him to share it with. See, very often, God is sitting right next to the television. He really is. You know, Kyle Idleman, the original writer of this series, he tells a story in the book that goes with it, how he had a missionary that went away to India, and he came back, and the missionary told Kyle Idleman the story of how when he went into the Indian homes, how they had this idol that was sitting up on this little sacred cabinet that sits in their house, and all of the chairs were positioned perfectly, so wherever you sat in the room, you were focused on the idol, so you didn't forget God. And Kyle Idleman thought it was rather funny until he went home and observed his living room. And there in this special cabinet in the middle of his room was a television set, and all the chairs were perfectly positioned so that no matter where you're sitting, you can see the television set. Now again, I don't think there's anything wrong with television until I go home and I also guess what my house has. Not one room, we got two. Where all the television set is positioned in the center and all the chairs are perfectly arranged, focused on the television. And we got even better than that. I went upstairs and started looking, and we got this wonderful little cabinet that we bought, and it's called they call it a computer center, and it folds up so that it keeps the computer. But when you open it up, it looks kind of like a little cabinet you'd see an idol sitting in. Except from the space that the idol goes in, that's where I have my monitor and keyboard. And I began to think to myself, have I made myself an idol? A pleasure? Of things that are about me? And I began to struggle with that. Because it's not just television, it's vacation. Oh man, don't think you don't do this because you already have started thinking about where you're going to spend your summer vacation. You probably started thinking about it sometime about the time last summer vacation ended. Okay? And you know, not only that, for those of us that have to ponder this, you have to save for it, and you have to plan your work schedule around it, and you have to make time and carve out time for vacation, even if it means when you go on vacation that, you know, I'm going to be a little cash short, but I know where I can draw some funds. Because I'm not going to be at church that week, so I guess I don't have to do anything there. So I can just take those funds and shift it to the... Don't tell me we don't do it, because I've been there. We do it. Maybe it's a game, and you can substitute game for hobby. Something that you participate in, and we begin to look at this little God, and we say, God, you're important, but you know what? We got to have that too. Maybe it's a restaurant. Maybe you've got this special place to eat, and you're going to go there no matter what. It's important to you. It's there. And then God says, are you worshiping it? And maybe sometimes we have to make the choice. And let's be honest, I don't want to choose. I want to make room for both in my life. I want my little God that pleases me. And I want my big God that, is supposed to take care of me and save me. And I hate to tell you this. It don't work that way. So the stage has been set. A war is going to be fought. 850 false gods against one true God. And they all gather on Mount Carmel. And then we get 1 Kings chapter 18, verses 25 through 28. Notice how the word starts. Choose. Now, I'm not choosing gods at this point. We're choosing bulls. Choose one of the bulls and prepare it first, since there are so many of you. Call the name of your God, but do not light the fire. So they took the bull and given them and prepared it, and they called on the name of Baal from the morning till noon. O Baal, answer us, they shouted, but there was no response. No one answered. And they danced around the altar that they had made. At noon, Elijah began to taunt them. He basically starts talking a little trash here. Shout louder, he said. Surely he is God. Perhaps he's in a deep thought or busy. You know, that's really what he's saying, is that maybe God is indisposed right now. I mean, he's got something more important to do than you. Maybe he's out traveling. Maybe he's sleeping, and so he must be awakened. So they shouted louder, and they began slashing themselves with swords and spears, as was their custom, until their blood flowed. And we're thinking, that ain't me. Not me. I don't dance around my idol to the point that I'm looking for something. I don't begin to do this kind of stuff, but I want you to ponder this. But really? Have you ever bled for alcohol in your life? You ever had that habit in your life that is just so addicting that you've sacrificed a marriage for it? Maybe not, so let's get a little closer to home. You ever bled for food? And by that I mean you've sacrificed your health to that God? To the point that we're on medications to lower our blood pressure and do this and do that, all because, folks, this is one of my issues. Because you know what? I like McDonald's Big Macs. Sorry, Rich. I do. I like Tasty Freeze hot dogs too. That's a bigger problem. I like food. And I have to begin, am I sacrificing to this God just because it's what I want? Have you ever bled for cable TV? Begin sacrificing your life because it's centered around not missing a television show? So what do the cable companies do? They want to make sure you really get it. So now we have this wonderful thing called On Demand, which means if I miss the show at this time, I can sign back later and watch it at my own convenience. And you realize what that does, don't you? It doesn't make me dedicated to one show. Now I've got about 5 or 6 shows I'm trying to keep up with because I can watch them whenever I want. Tell me the cable companies don't understand this concept of God's at war? Have you ever bled for sex? You've been so consumed with a sexual relationship in your life that you've compromised your own morals and your own values and your own system just because you know what? It is what I want, and I'm going to have what I want, and there's nothing wrong with it. And you realize what's happening. The gods of pleasure are taking everything. But just like Baal, they're giving nothing. Because I dedicate my life to these things, and I do these things, and I move on, and guess what I find out? They don't please me. They don't fix the issue. They just cause more issues. And I just have to keep going back to the same God, dancing around, crying even louder for nothing. You see, it's a true God that responds when we worship. And that's what you want to see, because I'm right here in verse 8 in chapter 18, verses 36 through 39. This is what happens. Elijah speaking, O Lord God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, prove today that you are God of Israel, and that I am your servant. Prove that I have done all this as your command. O Lord, answer me so that these people will know that you, O Lord, are God, and you have brought them back to yourself. Immediately, there's no waiting, the fire of the Lord flashed down from the heaven and burned up the young bull and the wood and the stones and the dust. It even licked up all the water in the trench. And when all the people saw it, they fell face down on the ground and cried out, the Lord, He is God. Yes, He is God. You see, the gods of pleasure aren't going to ever satisfy you. But the Lord God, well, He is who He is. I'd like to share a story with you called God's Gift Exchange Policy. It's about a young girl. Wow. I hope that's not God telling me it's time to leave. Okay, so technology is just great this morning. Nothing wants to cooperate with me. So here's the deal, though. It's a young girl, and she decides that she wants to have a string of pearls. Of course, she's only a little girl, so she can't really afford a string of pearls. So guess what she does? She buys a set of faux pearls. Plastic. And every night her father comes into her bedroom and asks her for the set of pearls. Can I have them? Of course, she had saved up her money and she bought them and she clutches them tightly. And she says, no, Daddy, these are mine. And she continues to clutch them night after. Every night he asks her for the pearls. Finally, one night, she reaches up and she takes them off and she hands them. Tears streaming down her face because she's now given up that thing that she wanted. Surprise, surprise. Guess what Dad had in his pocket? The real thing. It was a string of pearls that was the actual real pearls. And he takes them out and he replaces the plastic ones with the real thing. That's what God did. You see, the God of pleasure, if it becomes your focal point, it's plastic. It's fake. It's not the real thing. It's going to leave you wanting more. But, just so you know, the Lord God, the one that can rain down the fire and lift up all the water and the animal and cleanse you, He's got the real thing for you. The honest, the goodness relationship that will satisfy you. But you can't have both. The little girl couldn't hold on to her string of fake pearls and have the gift that her father was going to give her. She had to choose. She had to pick. And that's what God is calling us to do, is to begin to look at these gods. And I understand, I probably found week one. A lot of you probably, he found mine. Week one, he's got it. I know. So now the question is what are you going to do? Are you going to continue to worship the way you are worshiping? Or is it time for you to lay down the little gods and begin to focus on the God? Is it time to stop worshiping the gifts and start worshiping the giver? Would you please stand?